So in terms of server-side tracking, so there's a difference between optimizing towards new customers only and then first click new customers. So what's been kind of your experience with like the different types of server-side tracking only going after first-time customers? And then what's so important about like the first click new customer optimization?
Yeah. And what's interesting about this is the first click was more of a trying to import the truth rather than the end result, I guess I would say. As if you're passing in data from a tool, or passing data to a tool that has its own attribution settings, I guess I would say, is you're going to have a situation where you're going to import, if you import last click first time customers versus first click new first time customers, the FBID, the G-CLIDs, the G-braids, the W-braids are all broken and fragmented to the fact that even Shopify has no idea what's going on. So what our thought process there is if I can upload the FBID, G-CLID, or G-braid, or W-braid that was from the campaign that originally brought the user there, would it be more accurate when it matches than what is the last thing it can do? What I mean by that is we have to draw this out in a visual representation so it makes sense. So I'm going to share screen here for a moment.
Going into Paint.
Going into Paint. That's right.
Yes.
My good old fashioned Paint. So what Google does and what Meta does is if I have, a user here and a user here, this is the user's first click. And then this is the user's last click. Like we're doing 2 points in time.
I mean, it's pretty much a funnel at the end of the day.
Well,
your first
sort
click
of
versus last click, right? Like, wouldn't that just be a funnel?
It would, but they are perceived differently if there's missing data. So
Gotcha.
What I'm saying is that here's what we're seeing is that the user's first click over here and last click over here, if we can't string these users together, we're essentially Meta or Google will see user number 1 and user number 2. These are 2 different users because we know Meta and Google is not going to be like, hey, 247 days ago, your YouTube video is actually the one that brought you your first time customer. Like that doesn't happen. And we also know that there's split attribution. And we also know that a lot of times Meta and Google both see these first click and last click as user number 1 and then user number 2. So we know that it doesn't string the users together. Otherwise, third-party imports, third-party attribution companies would never be a thing. If Meta was like, yep, these people, that person there and that person there, I know is actually not user 1, user 2. I'm going to string them together and I'm going to show you where they actually produced a result. It's like, you can't even get all my conversions last click in the same day to report. And you're expecting me to believe that a click 36 days ago, you can track that? So what our thought process one is, if you were going to upload one to optimize, knowing that this is the actual path, would you upload the first click or the last click?
Gotcha. So it comes down to the goal is you're going after the first known click, not necessarily top of funnel, although more top of funnel, I guess you can say.
Yeah, it's more, we're uploading the truth of where the user started rather than uploading the last step of where the user ended, because we're not gonna rely on Meta or Google to say, oh, thank you for uploading the last click. I'm so good that I went all the way back in time and found them. It's like, well, you don't do that.
Yeah.
So if we upload the first click, but it can backfill the rest of it, fine. But I'm not going to upload the last click and hope that it backfills the first of it.
Yeah.
So that was the thought process behind uploading first click versus last click.
Yeah.
Because it has to go through its own attribution, like data driven or Meta's last click. So if I upload only last click to Meta and Meta's last click, I'm purposely just like, well, just go ahead and count what it used to count. Might as well.
Gotcha.
So that was the thought process behind uploading. Now, this one is my last test here. And you're going to see that we've had some billing issues in the account. But we went from tracking all to only tracking new right here. And this is something I did want to kind of share is we started with like 3 and then ended up with 126 for the cost difference of $5,000 and $5,000, literally $5,400 on day 1, getting 3, and $5,400 on day 26, getting the same thing. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at when we restarted this week here before the last pause on the 20th. And what I want to share with you is something that I have not really seen before. When a campaign is paused for 2 days and when it's kind of down and out for the count kind of thing, we typically don't see good performance when you ramp back up with a 50G spend in a week. And this is actually coming from a company called AudienceOS. This is not Capixio. This is not Blot Out with Mandar. It's another company, just because we needed more resources while we scale existing, my existing customers and existing clients. And so we're seeing 150% increase in a week. So basically the account was spending the week before the pause, 20 G's. And then we increased it by 30 grand, which is 157% increase. And we're seeing 154% increase in new customer acquisition. So it's definitely working extremely well. I mean, our conversion value and our cost is dead on. And our conversion value by cost is 8% better after dumping in 50 G's when we're only counting new customer acquisition.
Wow.
So it's pretty impressive. This is my second Google Ads account that I have CAPI imports, and our third one that we're probably going to be launching soon is a very, very large company you all are knowing about, which is Kitsch. We're going to be doing first click CAPI imports for Google on Kitsch, and that one we spend about $500,000 a week in. So that one's going to be a lot of fun to play with.
All the data. Well, when they have a good LTV, because I feel like server side is more impactful when you have a really high LTV to only optimize towards new customers. So
yeah,
it still is impactful, but it's just more impactful. So question on this. So is this like using edge tag as well and like going through that whole deal, or is it like a separate? Is it like similar to Elevar? What made you go with this like server side tracking versus like Elevar or something else?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that, because I did weeks, months, and a long time in due diligence and researching companies and all the other stuff, and end up talking to Solo Wave, and they're like, hey, we already have a person called AudienceOS, work with them. I said, okay, cool. So it just landed in my lap because I couldn't find anybody else besides another company called Aimerce. Met with Aimerce, the founder of Aimerce, yesterday, actually. Pretty cool company. I ended up meeting with her for another company, but met with the founder of Aimerce.ai. And the difference here with this company, they also do CAPI imports. Like everyone else that's jumping on the bandwagon.
Yeah, it's becoming a thing.
Yep, I know. I was 3 months early, and everyone called me crazy. But they do a CAPI import as well, but they actually don't use edge tag. And so when we use them, we actually saw more imports of new customers than we actually had of new customers. So that was kind of interesting. I'm like, how did that happen?
That's a problem.
At this one, I wouldn't necessarily recommend. And I think well, no, not yet. Another member of our community here is actually using them and saw the same thing.
Oh, okay.
So,
gotcha.
Worked with her. We're going to launch on, I have a new client called Dollar Shave Club that will be coming on board with me. Yeah, it's a pretty large company, very well known, and Aimerce is going to be doing the CAPI imports for him. So we'll see how that goes. But that'll be the real test. But hopefully you guys are learning, and I'm going through. And the first time Capixio is not ready. We have Blot Out, which has been fantastic. They're just a little slow. So far, AudienceOS matches to top line and is working well with CAPI imports.
On first click too.
AudienceOS.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I made them, which was actually kind of interesting. I had to go through Matt Tooley and I forget exactly who we're doing this with, but we talked literally about everything. I can't remember where I talked to this gentleman here about, but worries. It was whatever we did. But we went through and I'm like, hey, we got to upload first click, and he goes, okay, we'll do that. And so that's we think is working pretty well with the AOS new customer. Again, it's if it follows the same thing that I have been doing, I get the same result. Which is fantastic to see.
So it might not be using edge tag, but it's matching the top line numbers of like new customers.
Yeah, they do DNS, change the party into first cookie. So it's basically the same thing, only they don't have a data warehouse. They are just essentially using DNS with an API. So it's skipping the warehouse, but it still seems to be functioning the same way. Now their cost is about every 100 grand you spend, you have a $1,200 per month cost. Gotcha. That's approximately it.
That's nice.
Yeah. So it's, but the cheapest it gets is 1,200. So, but so far so good with this test here as well. I mean, launching a campaign basically after being paused and suspended and then jumping right back into, a $50K a week spend is pretty good. Like that's a very good test.